In 2005, in Edmonton, Irene Khan, the Secretary General of Amnesty International, was presented with the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women's Social Justice Award. Khan was recognized for the report, Stolen Sisters, a human's response to discrimination and violence against Indigenous women in Canada. This report revealed the violence, discrimination, and social injustices committed against Aboriginal women in Canada, which was not a priority to our government's social or judicial systems. Khan was recognized for bringing the violence against Aboriginal women in Canada to the international level. Amnesty has worked with the Native Women's Association of Canada in bringing awareness of the missing and murdered Aboriginal women to the world stage. However, the issue of murdered and missing women was being raised by the Institute for the Advancement of Aboriginal Women in Edmonton. To quote myself, as president and founder of IAW, I read out the names of 110 Aboriginal women who were murdered and missing with no one charged on the occasion of receiving the Alberta Human Rights Award in 1998, right here at this City Hall. And I said, Amnesty did what we couldn't do, that of bringing awareness of our missing and murdered Aboriginal women locally, provincially, federally, and internationally. And in 2007, Neve was appointed an officer of the Order of Canada and is credited with bringing the information, the identification of the missing and murdered women in this country to all those levels. So I have great pride and appreciation for Amnesty International, because I can guarantee that Amnesty, being a the respected organization in the world, has taken this on, and without them, I would say that the issue of the murdered and missing women would never have been raised effectively. We worked here in Edmonton long before the issue became known, and we held many opportunities to speak about that, but you know, nobody paid attention. Nobody cared. In fact, I believe that the general attitude was, oh well, you know, it's better off, it's good riddance. And this attitude is one that pervades today. And I urge you to make a difference. I thought of things we could do, and one of the things you can do is think about the Native Women's Association has identified 652 women, but I believe the numbers are much higher than that. I believe they're in the thousands. And that is because of the inadequate investigation of the murders. So I close with that. I thank you, and I am proud to be here to introduce Alex Neve.
Thank you so very much, Muriel, for that introduction. And the first thing I actually want to say is to the family members we've just heard from. I truly want you to know that above all else, I am going to go away from today's gathering with those memories and those stories that we have heard in my heart and in my mind, and truly that will continue to fuel the important work that we do. So know that Nina and Bella and Lucas will be remembered far beyond today's events and right across the country. Friends, I certainly want to begin by telling you what a true honor it is for me to be here with you today for this event, and I wish I could stay for the march. I need to head toward the airport afterwards, but no, I would be walking with you if I could. I have had the honor, and I do use that word, to join October vigils for Indigenous women in many cities across Canada for far too many years. And as is the case today, these gatherings are always, on the one hand, full of so much sorrow, sadness, and memories, as we've just heard. And on the other hand, these events, these vigils, are also a time of remarkable determination and strength, and inevitable necessary outrage. And it must be both of those things, the sadness and the strength. Because today, once again, we have the reminders of the names, the faces, the lives that lie behind the deep, deep tragedy of Canada's murdered and missing Indigenous women. But we also see the power and the insistence of families, friends, the community, leaders, and many organizations speaking out with clear demands for change, clear demands for safety and justice. Amnesty International has stood with Indigenous women in Edmonton, in Alberta, across Canada, for a decade now in this struggle for basic rights and justice, a struggle for safety, a struggle really at its very core for dignity and respect. In 2004, as Muriel's just reminded us, we launched our major Stolen Sisters report and have joined with you in campaigning and speaking out ever since. And we have joined with you because at its heart, the crisis of violence against Indigenous women and girls in Canada is a human rights crisis. Governments, and they often do, may prefer to think of it as it's a troubling criminal problem, or maybe dismiss it as an unfortunate social problem. They may pretend that it is just a matter of figuring out budgets and deciding government spending priorities. But we know better. We know that Indigenous women and girls are far more likely than any other woman or girl in this country to face violence. They are far, far more likely to go missing. And that Indigenous women and girls are far, far, far more likely to be killed than any other woman or girl in Canada. Far, far, far more likely. And that is all about discrimination, racism, and sexism rolled up into one ugly, toxic mix of human rights abuse. If Indigenous women and girls are at greater risk of being singled out for violence because they are Indigenous and because they are female, that is a human rights issue. If justice and policing systems don't protect as they should because of racist, sexist attitudes, that is a human rights issue. And if safety, services, and programs are not available or are not appropriate because funding for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities isn't a priority or is always the first thing to be cut, that is a human rights issue. It all adds up to this, friends. Violence against Indigenous women and girls is one of the most serious, the most long-standing, and disgracefully unaddressed human rights crises, and I use that word, crises, we face in this country. And until we get governments, the federal government in particular, to fully and unconditionally recognize and agree that it is all about human rights, the responses will continue to be piecemeal and half-hearted, and the violence will not abate. We've heard about the numbers and the statistics. Muriel's just reminded us they're probably far beyond what has been calculated. It's staggering. The painful stories of mothers, sisters, daughters, and aunties killed and gone missing. Heartbreaking. And against that backdrop, the defiant unwillingness of the federal government to do the one thing that seems so obvious to everyone else has become breathtakingly ridiculous. It is a nationwide tragedy. It is complex, and it involves many levels of government. It is certainly multifaceted, necessitating responses on many fronts, including policing, social services, justice, education, and it certainly desperately needs to be well and properly coordinated. So that obvious solution the federal government even refuses to talk about, a comprehensive national plan of action. What could be more obvious, more simple, and more necessary? But the federal government continues to say no. They say they will simply continue to cut checks as needed and make their own decisions about what programs are needed. They say everything will be fine. Do you believe that? Things are not fine. Obviously they're not fine. Far from it. Across the country, Indigenous women and girls continue to be killed and go missing. Things are not fine. But I don't want to leave us in a total feeling of despair, because we are, I believe, getting close. After years, far too many years, of vigils and gatherings and marches like today, years of reports, government meetings, and media interviews, and most importantly, after years of standing with the families of murdered and missing Indigenous women, we are getting close, because we now have, and just let this list sink in, every single provincial and territorial premier now, every single provincial, territorial, and national human rights commission, every federal opposition leader, every relevant expert and body within the United Nations, a number of whom are actually in Canada this fall looking at this issue. And we now have also a long list of Canada's closest allies, including the United States, Britain, Australia, all of whom spoke out about this during a recent UN review of Canada's human rights record. All of those experts, governments, and political leaders agree with us. They agree with you. They have all endorsed the calls for a national inquiry and a national plan of action to deal with violence and discrimination against Indigenous women and girls in this country. How much longer can the federal government be the only one, because they are the only one holding out? Well, not much longer, Prime Minister Harper. I know I'm in Edmonton today, not Ottawa, but I hope you heard that. In the face of one of the most serious and wrenching human rights crises Canada has faced for decades, Prime Minister Harper, you cannot continue to be the only one who says no to a national inquiry and no to a comprehensive national action plan. Things are not fine, Prime Minister. A crisis needs leadership. A crisis does not need excuses. Take action now, Prime Minister. You're hearing it today from Edmonton, but you're hearing it from right across this country. Launch a national inquiry leading to a national action plan, and do it now. Thank you.